Hey everyone, welcome to DDM4422 Pro Tools 101. In this video, I'd like to walk you through on how to download and install Pro Tools onto your personal computers. Those of you who registered should have received an email from Avid confirming the deposit of a temporary Pro Tools license into your Avid accounts. The email looks something like this. Do check your junk mail folder, as sometimes it can get filtered there as well. Now, just so you know, this process of downloading and installing Pro Tools will take anywhere between 40 minutes to a little over an hour. It depends on your internet speeds and the capabilities of the computer that you are using. So before you begin, make sure you have that much time on hand. The installation can be performed on either Macs or Windows, so you can use whichever platform you're most comfortable with. There's one thing that I'd like to highlight at this time though. Many of us have the tendency to keep updating our devices to the latest versions of the softwares. Whenever we see that little update notification in the corners, our first instinct is to hit update just to get rid of it. That is not necessarily a good idea, especially if your computer is your creative workstation. Almost all of the pro media apps like Pro Tools, Media Composer, Sibelius, Cubase, Nuendo, and even the Adobe Suite usually take a bit of time before they are 100% compatible with the newest and the latest OS. So if you use any of these apps and you update your OS every time they have a small update, it may break compatibility. It may stop working for you and you'll be stuck. This applies to both platforms, Macs and Windows. So be patient, and whenever you feel like hitting that update button, always make sure that all the softwares that you use every day are 100% compatible. So let's get to it. The first thing we want to do is to download Pro Tools, and we do so by logging into our Avid accounts. Using a browser of your choice, head to account.avid.com and log into your Avid Master account. Once you're in, click on My Products and Subscriptions. There, you should see Pro Tools listed under your products. Clicking on it will show you the validity of your license and the iLock ID the license has been deposited into. I'll explain what an iLock is in a bit, don't worry. At the bottom of this section, click on Show to see all the downloads that are available to you with this license. Now, this may seem very daunting and confusing because there's quite a lot of choices here. So let me show you which of these files you actually need to download. First, we need the main Pro Tools app itself. The current version of Pro Tools is 2019.12. If you're using a Mac, you will need to download this DMG file. If you're using a Windows machine, you will need to download this zip file. Clicking on it should automatically commence the download for you. Next, we want all the plugins, the effects, the instruments that come with Pro Tools for free. So, scroll down a bit to the Pro Tools plugins section. If you're on a Mac, you'll need the following 4 files. The first AIR Instruments Bundle 19.12 installer, the first AIR Effects Bundle 12, Expand 2 2019.12, and the 11 Effects Bundle 18.8. If you're on Windows, these are the corresponding files that you should download. The first AIR Instruments Bundle 18.10 installer, the first AIR Effects Bundle 18.8.1, Expand 2 2018.10, and the 11 Effects Bundle 18.8. Since our license is for the complete version of Pro Tools, we actually get a few more good plugins to play with. So scroll down even further to the Avid Complete Plugin Bundle section and click on the Avid Complete Plugin Bundle 18.10 DMG file if you're on a Mac, or on the corresponding zip file if you're on Windows. Avid also gives you a really cool hybrid synth called Falcon. So if you're into music creation and wish to play with it, feel free to download the Mac or Windows version from this section here. The Falcon plugin isn't part of this course, so I'm going to skip its download and install for now. But by all means, if you wish to have it, go ahead and download it. Once all the files have completed downloading, we can go ahead and quit our browser. We won't be needing it anymore. Then head to the files that we downloaded. By default, macOS downloads everything to the Downloads folder, so let's bring that up. Before we unpack these files and begin, it's always good to decide in what order we want to perform this installation. I always install Pro Tools first and then get to installing the plugins. That way, if the plugin needs to be in a special place within your system, those places will be made ready for you by Pro Tools itself. So from the downloaded files, let's first mount the Pro Tools installer by double-clicking on the DMG file. Then, launch the installer file within it. Hit Continue. Agree to their licensing terms. And then begin the installation by clicking on Install and authenticating your system. As it nears completion, you will be asked if you wish to send anonymous information to Avid to help improve their products and services. I usually say no, but feel free to say yes if you want. And that's done. When an installation gets completed, you may be asked if you wish to delete the installer file that you have downloaded from your system. I don't delete anything unless I'm 100% sure that I will not need it again. So I'm going to hang on to this by saying keep. We don't need anything else from here, so we can close this window and unmount the disk image. Now let's move on to installing all of the plugins that we got. We don't need to follow any order here as none of these files are interdependent. So I'm going to start with the first one here, the Avid Complete Plugin Bundle. Let's mount the disk image by double-clicking the DMG file and then launch the installer file that's inside. Hit Continue and agree to their licensing terms. We now get to see all the plugins that will get installed on our system. If for some reason you wish to not have any of them, you can deselect them from this list. But I'd like to have them all, so let's just continue and begin the installation by authenticating our system. Once again, we may be asked if we wish to delete the installer file that we have downloaded, which I don't want to do, so I'll say keep. With this done, let's close this window and eject the disk image. And then mount the next one, the 11FX bundle. The process is the same. We launch the installer, agree to their license, and authenticate the system to proceed with the installation. We don't get to select anything in this installer as it's just one plugin. Again, I'm choosing to keep the installer file until I'm sure I won't need it again. So let's eject this and move on to the next download. Next, we have the first AIR effects bundle. This too is exactly like what we just did with the 11 bundle. There's nothing to change within the installer. So mount the disk image, launch the installer, agree to the license, and authenticate to complete the installation. The next DMG is the first AIR Instruments bundle. Now this can be a little different. So let's mount the disk image and launch the installer. After we agree to the licensing terms, it seems we have a choice to make here. Many composers prefer to have all of their sample libraries stored on a separate hard drive. Usually this separate hard drive is a faster and a better performing hard drive, like a better SSD for instance. It is also because sample libraries usually take up a lot of hard disk space. So if your primary hard drive is not that big, it is a good idea to have all of your samples stored on a different drive. So if you're using such a drive that's dedicated to samples, we can request that the samples associated with this instrument be installed on that drive instead. To do so, we click on the location drop-down next to the content for virtual instruments option and select Other to point to the external location of our choice. I don't have an external drive for my samples, so I will be installing it at the default location itself. So without making any changes, I'll hit Continue and complete the installation. And lastly, we have the Expand to instrument to install. Like the previous installer, we have the choice to have the samples installed in another location if we want. But I'm going to stick to the default location for this one as well. So I'll just continue and authenticate to complete the installation. With all of the installations complete, let's verify that everything has been installed properly. In our Launchpad, we should see two apps that have been installed on our system: Pro Tools and the iLok License Manager. Let's launch Pro Tools. Since this is the first time we are launching Pro Tools, we need the app to be properly configured to use our system. A lot of this is handled by the Pro Tools Helper tool, which would need to run in the background. So let's authenticate that to proceed. Now, at this time, it may feel like your system has frozen, but if you look at the dock or your taskbar in Windows, you will see that Pro Tools is still working. This first launch of Pro Tools does take a few minutes, so give it that time. Don't panic or don't try to launch Pro Tools repeatedly. Let it do its thing. Once it's ready, we will be prompted to activate our Pro Tools license. This is where the iLok comes in. The iLok is a license management platform. Think of it like a bank for your licenses. When we buy a software that uses this platform, the manufacturer will give us the software, but will deposit our license into our iLok account. So if I was to install Pro Tools on my personal computer and attempt to launch it, it would not launch because my license is not yet associated with this machine. There are two ways in which we can get this license from our iLok account to our computer. The first is to use a physical USB device called the iLok. This is what an iLok looks like. This is actually the first generation of the iLok. It could hold up to 100 licenses and has been around for many years now. They stopped making this iLok because most of the software manufacturers moved on to 64-bit and the hardware needed to be updated as well. So they came up with the second generation iLok. The second generation iLok can hold up to 500 licenses compared to 100 on the first generation. This can be still used even today, but a couple of years before they updated the design once again, they made it even more smaller and a little bit more sturdier. This is the iLok that you can get if you go to buy one today. This little thing can store 1,500 licenses, much more than the earlier two iLoks combined. So it's quite popular. Our licenses can be transferred to and from these iLoks using the iLok License Manager app, which is what got installed with Pro Tools. So once our license is moved into a physical iLok, we could plug it into our personal computers and the software will find it automatically. But as the systems we use begin to drop the physical USB port itself, there was a need for us to be able to use these licenses without any hardware. So they came up with a cloud-based solution. Today, we can move our licenses to the cloud and link our personal computers to this cloud to use those licenses. But not all licenses can be used through iLok Cloud. Thankfully, Pro Tools can. And that is how we are going to activate and use our Pro Tools license as well. So you don't need to have a physical USB key for our class. So let's activate our license by signing in with our iLok ID and password. You can have Pro Tools remember this information so that you don't need to enter it every time. Pro Tools will now log into your iLok account and see what all licenses you have in there that can be used. Once it finds the licenses it needs, it will offer to activate those licenses with iLok Cloud. This process creates a temporary link between your computer and your iLok account via the cloud. So your iLok account will know which computer is using the license. If you don't have a physical iLok and this is the only way you're going to use your license, you can tell Pro Tools to always do this and then hit OK. Depending on what all plugins you have installed, Pro Tools will search for the licenses it needs and activate them onto this computer via iLok Cloud. Once it is done, we will get a confirmation that all went well. It's important to understand that even though our licenses are in the cloud, they are linked to this computer only, which means if I intend to use Pro Tools on another computer, I will have to first unlink this computer from the cloud and then relink the other computer to my iLok Cloud in order to use the licenses there. This can be done using the iLok License Manager app if you need to. You may also be prompted to allow notifications with regards to your activation. I usually don't allow this because I don't like to be distracted when I'm working, but it's a personal preference, so you can choose what you like. Your OS may also prompt you to enable a few system permissions, like accessing your Documents folder on a Mac. This is where Pro Tools stores all the help resources that are available to you for reference. So let's say OK. With the newer version of macOS, we need to explicitly allow Pro Tools to access the microphone. As a privacy measure, macOS restricts all apps from accessing audio input by default. So when you're prompted to do so, make sure you click on OK. Pro Tools will now initialize all of the plugins that you have installed, along with your virtual instruments library, and also initialize your connected audio hardware by looking at the number of inputs and outputs available for you to use. This last step would require you to restart Pro Tools. If you're using macOS Catalina, that is macOS 10.15, you will see this prompt though. And this should only matter to you if you intend to import media that is in a format that relies on QuickTime for playback. So if you're on Windows or you're using macOS 10.14, you will not even see this prompt. Pro Tools has always used Apple's QuickTime to import and playback certain file types, like MOV files. But with macOS Catalina, Apple changed the way other applications can access QuickTime, thereby breaking compatibility with Pro Tools. It's not the end of the world. It just means that if we want to import these kinds of media, we need to do it in another format. So if you have a QuickTime file or QuickTime movie that you would like to import, for example, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be glad to help you convert the file to a format that Pro Tools can understand and work with. So for now, I'm just going to say don't show this again and hit OK. If everything has gone right, Pro Tools should launch without any hitches and should show you this window called the dashboard. I'm going to just create a new session called Test Project and hit Create. And we are in. This is what Pro Tools looks like. Next, let's confirm that all of our plugins are here too. To do that, I'll create 2 tracks, one audio track and one instrument track. then switch over to my mix window, from where I can see all of the plugins available to me to insert onto my tracks. Let's insert the channel strip for now. That looks good. Now let's load up an instrument on the instrument track. That looks good too. Let's confirm that the sample library is all there. Yup. All good. Let's quit for now. And yes, let's save this. If you wish to receive notifications from Pro Tools, you can choose to allow this. I'm going to decline as I'm not a big fan of getting interrupted. Lastly, for our class, we will need some media and exercise files. At the end of every chapter in the book is an exercise through which we will practice everything that we have learned. Let's download these files and have them ready as well. Head back to the browser of your choice and go to alpp.us/pt101-v12. This should automatically trigger a zip file for download. Once done, if your OS hasn't automatically done so, unzip the file to reveal this 101v12 download media folder. To keep things simple and uniform across the board, let's drag this over onto our desktop and work with it from there. If you look inside, you should see the following files and folders. You don't need to do anything with these now, just keep them handy. And that's it. This is how you download and install Pro Tools on your personal computers. Hope you found this tutorial useful. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through our channel on Teams or via email. I'd like for you all to complete this installation and download the media folder at the earliest, please, so that we are all on the same page going forth. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.